the all new digital experience, brand spanking new. So my name is Ty Harmon. I am the founder and the chief of tech recon at To the Edge. We are an innovation and emerging technology consulting practice that relocated to Dallas a little over 3 years ago from Atlanta, Georgia. We have teams across the United States and now over in Asia as well that are helping large organizations to basically respond to disruption by identifying, testing and driving adoption of new capabilities to solve business problems or new market opportunities. You've got my contact information there to learn a little bit more about what we do and who we are. You can go to totheedge.com and look at our revamped site to learn a little bit more of our approach and methodology. So one of the favorite quotes that we like to bring out is the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And so this slide really brings out not only things at CES, but some interesting things as we do consistent and persistent tech recon for our clients. BIOA is a company out of Spain that is using soil and ambient conditions within plant life to actually power IoT detection systems. As we all know, power is really the long pole in the tent for distributed IoT sensor networks. And so it's a very fascinating company as well. You got Mojo Vision, who is seeking FDA authorization and approval for their AR contact lens. So these things are in flight right now to be able to project things on your eyeballs and to be able to overlay contextual information without the hardware intrusions that we have here today. Many of you probably saw Cadillac and others, maybe Dog and Pony Show, futuristic viewpoint of different emerging technologies, whether it's vertical takeoff and landing in the UAM market or the autonomous shuttle space. And so these platforms continue to gain interest and, kind of interest across the United States and elsewhere in the world as future mobility solutions. And as a side note, here in North Texas, and especially in places like Austin and other places, with the growth that we have today, as well as the projected increase in corporate relocations into Texas in 2021 and beyond, we all have to be considerate of what is our mobility infrastructure that can help have sustainable growth that will allow people to freely move goods, services, and commute to their businesses, whatever that may look like in the new normal. But at the same time, be very sensitive to the fact that housing prices are one of the biggest barriers to economic stability and growth. And we don't want to have some challenges that other parts of the country have experienced. North Texas, not a big deal. We slap a highway, slap a subdivision. We're pretty distributed. But in places like Austin and others, this is going to be super critical. Quantum computing, some of you may thought this was a cappuccino machine at one point, but this is a quantum computing rig that IBM and others have done. You may not have been exposed to what quantum computing is or quantum networks and kind of the underpinnings of quantum mechanics, but it's definitely something that I think every IT professional needs to be aware of. There are solutions that are coming online in the marketplace, many of them in labs, many of them in military and industrial complexes for weapon systems and sensor networks. Several of them are in China as well. And so these are incredibly powerful machines that solve very complex problem sets that will create challenges for enterprise IT organizations before they provide solutions. I mean that is that nation states that have this capability will be able to very easily crack standard encryption codes and techniques that will render most of the internet inaccessible if they in fact decided to do a denial of service attack. So quantum computing is one of those things that popped out of Pandora's box. And so we're all kind of collectively trying to drive towards this future state and also not be lured into the hype that is the quantum computing. And then the last was actually shown at CES along with Cadillac. This is the Mercedes new console. You can see that we've taken Tesla a step further. There's no longer a gigantic iPad in the middle of the car. It's actually a touch screen and an interactive display that is across the entire dash. And this will be going into a new line of Mercedes vehicles moving forward. And so one of the key things is, yes, the future is already here. And in our model, as well as in many of yours, you're always looking beyond the horizon, right? Step to the edge. That's kind of where the name comes from, to really understand what are those disruptions that are out there in the marketplace that may not impact me today, but may impact me in 3 to 5 years. And how do I prepare for them? Usually it's not a single technology that causes disruption. It's a combination of technologies. It's the secondary or tertiary effects from those combinations that create tremendous disruption and change, and also opportunity within the marketplace. So as we look at the future, just understand that, yes, we believe it's going to take a long time to get here, but generally speaking, it gets here a lot faster than what we would believe. And I think we all would agree that COVID-19 did more for transformation than many of our efforts have ever tried within companies for many, many years. And so as we look towards some of the content for the day, that's an important consideration. Again, back to how North Texas can be the epicenter. This is simply our methodology. It follows a standard innovation workflow. We branded something called Testing and Experimentation as a Service, or Texas. I was born in Idlewild, Texas, raised in Idlewild, Texas. So when I finally moved, when I created the company, come up with the Texas acronym, and whether you love it or hate it, it's emotional and people remember it, and that's all that matters. And so effectively, this is our model, and many of you do this as well, which is how do you evaluate emerging trends, apply those to business opportunities, either named by your organization or that you're bringing in terms of potential implications to your business, and defining those critical success factors. Engaging with a global supply of innovation. Many of you provide that innovation within Tech Titans, as well as many of you create innovation. And so both your internal resources and the external ecosystem, how do you provide those and come together to find the best of breed solution that can solve that business opportunity? Then obviously an iterative testing and experimentation model. And then with that model, help set the conditions to drive enterprise adoption, because we can create new novel technologies. If no one uses it, it doesn't matter. And therefore adoption is the proxy for the business results. And so why that model? One, just kind of give everybody an overview of what innovation is in terms of many organizations, and it's our model as well. But two, kind of bringing together, why do we go to CES? Why do we go to the National Retail Foundation or Black Hat or Battery World Technology or Mobile World Congress? We have teams that are scouting all of these various different venues, because they're honeypots, if you will, a collection of companies that are broadcasting their innovation. So it's a really good, efficient use of our time, and probably your time as well, to evaluate emerging trends, and also to identify suppliers that directly align to proof of concepts that we're actively managing, running for our clients. This is a way for us to really engage with those communities in an efficient way. So this is why we go to CES and why most people go to these types of shows. Beth, do we have any questions before we move on?
No, we don't.
All right, perfect. So what drove us in terms of some top 10 trends that allowed us to really go, and this is our scoping effort. So for anybody who's planning to go to a show, whether it's HIMSS coming up in March, whether it's South by Southwest, which will also be all virtual, obviously you want to start with what's your prioritized list of why you are going. Some of these are business opportunities you may be tracking. Some of these may be technology trends. These are what our clients in the Fortune 200 are currently pursuing in terms of business opportunities and technology trends, and also represents the data from our portfolio of last year. We did about 100 proof of concepts. Over the last 36 months, we've done 375 proof of concepts for our clients, and managed well over $4 million last year in innovation investment on behalf of enterprises. And so this represents kind of what that data is for us. And worker and patient safety was lower on the list, always important, but raised significantly last year for COVID-19. So a lot of risk mitigation technologies and approaches for that as well. Just call out a couple before we move on, just so you can have a frame of reference of why we're presenting some of the findings that we did for this particular presentation. And you can see the rest there. Process automation is really automation in general. This is not just robotic process automation. This is autonomous platforms. This is robotics. This is other types of manual manipulation of goods and services and functions with robotic systems. And so that is where I just want to call that out specifically. The technology trends that we continue to be tracking on an ongoing basis. Computer vision is a very hot topic, and a lot of our work is in computer vision, whether that's in autonomous platforms or other types of supply chain operations for either goods inspection or understanding where assets are and being able to coordinate those. Sensors, distributed power, machine learning, autonomous platforms, all these can kind of be locked into process automation, as well as natural language processing. Intermittent computing is something that's popped up on the radar most recently. Intermittent computing is a new type of programming languages. And basically what that says is that a computer program can sustain its functions and processes with a power disruption. It can pick up if power's on, and it can turn off if power is off, and it doesn't have to repeat that cycle. And that's important because a lot of our work is now moving into the context of how do we have distributed IoT platforms that have inconsistent power, inconsistent communications. I know there's some people on here that they're 5G, and that's great for densely populated areas, but how do you have these sensor networks? And so this is the context by which we went to CES to look for solutions that were around these particular areas and interests. So let me pause there again and see if there's any other questions.
We do have a question, Ty.
Okay.
How do early stage companies who might have a solution for a Fortune 500 company problem or strategic innovation effort learn about them and approach these large companies?
Oh, that's a tough one. One of the things that we do is on our site, we have a list of innovation opportunities that are funded by our clients that someone can register on, and that's at totheedge.com, and that's to become an innovation partner. Outside of that, for folks that have innovation programs, it's really to identify that function or that individual who is responsible for the innovation efforts in their organization. And that's critical because they are empowered to work with business leaders. Sometimes they have funding for innovation efforts. And so building that network of innovation people is probably the most critical. Otherwise, you're grasping at straws and you're trying to dial for dollars, and that's very difficult. But if you can identify within large companies, many of Tech Titans members have these innovation programs or R&D efforts, that is probably the best starting point.
Great, thank you. And I believe that was from a friend of yours because the quote or the question ended in beat Navy.
Always beat Navy every day.
Yeah, it's from Charlie Quinn.
I'm sorry, that's there's a couple of West Pointers on here. I'm one of them. And so that's part of our daily lexicon is to say beat Navy.
I understand that.
Yeah. So let's get into what changed in CES. And so here's a picture of last year, the throngs of people. I was convinced I had COVID-19 because I was there with 180,000 other people and 30,000 were from mainland China. And I figured I got sick then, that's where it happened. Nope, no antibodies in my system. So that was a bad hypothesis. But we went from this physical environment where you were really walking around, having a good pair of shoes, managing crowds, having rich conversations and activities, to a fully online experience. And I'm going to go to the next slide, really just to highlight some of the changes here. And there was a question before we started about what was good and what was different about it. So we had 44 featured speakers. We had hundreds of on-demand sessions and a little bit less number of exhibitors. 1957 is what's on the board. So let's talk about the pros and cons. Generally speaking, I never attended a session, whether it was a vendor session, a featured speaker, a roundtable session. And that was just for time management. For those that are not necessarily working across multiple industries like we are in my company, you may want to go look at what other industries are doing and learn about what their activities are. And so those are great opportunities. I don't want to discount the value, but for our purposes in time management, they weren't necessarily useful in the physical space. What is beneficial is I did get to listen to many of them again and found a few vendors that weren't on the CES list. They're not presenting, but there were companies that were used and kind of validated. Again, we look for rich sources of vendors that are differentiated. So there was a couple of VC portfolios, accelerator portfolios. And so we found that the on-demand digital was very beneficial because we were able to attend those sessions. And yes, some of them were very, what we call big hand, small map, very high level presentations, but some of them got into the details and you can scroll through and fast forward like any video And what's also critically important to understand is the all digital format is going to be available through February the 15th. So we had a very long cycle, not just 3 days normally, or 2 days, or some went for 1 day. It's a tough haul to do 5 days at CES physically. And so you're able to do that, as well as all of the sessions were recorded. So if you missed something, you could go see it. It was a very rich way of doing that. So I would give an A+, if you will, on the sessions and the featured speakers. I'd like to give an F to CES, and I will be more than happy to communicate with anybody who knows the CES people, because the vendor side, frankly, was not very efficient and not very user-friendly. Up until CES launched a month before, the only thing that you could see were these cards that I'm showing here that gave the company name and no other information. If you've tried to sort through the CES vendor list in the past, you know that it's been exceptionally difficult because, as we talked before, people put augmented reality or artificial intelligence, machine learning, computer vision, all the buzzwords that we have in the industry, they put that in their description or metadata for their company. So you'll get returns, multiple returns at a company, when really they don't do that, or they do a very, very small piece of that. When we turned CES on, and it's still on today, we had the same user experience. Company names only, with a click to see what they were doing. I had to click through the company there, Fuse AR, as an example. When I got to Fuse AR, there was a disclaimer that says that if I wanted to transmit my name, contact information, phone number to Fuse AR for that scanning function that they used to do in the physical space. So I was giving them, basically checking into their booth, if you will. And then I was able to read the description. Now, when you're trying to sort through over almost 2,000 companies, that's a pain. That's not an efficient process. And so that's why I give a very low grades, is because it's very difficult to weed through those as well. And so that I think has a lot of room for improvement. The other room for improvement that I think we're going to be suggesting through multiple channels to CES, as well as I think this is critical for all of you that are looking for return to work strategies and maybe a different collaboration model. I think all of us, as an aside, have experienced our kids playing Xbox or Nintendo and talking to their friends at the same time. Several streaming services now have the ability to watch TV shows with your friend. I'm unfortunately of a different demographic that I don't understand that. I don't want to do it. It's not something that I want to do. But in terms of return to work, think about a CES session that you were able to watch with coworkers, business executives that were interested in the topics, and be able to bring them into that discussion for a small period of time. Those are the type of interesting collaboration capabilities that I think CES could use and other shows could use, as well as if you're returning to work, think about the notion of presence. We have online presence, yes, you're available, but think about the video presence that you could create to bring people into a shared environment to watch or to participate kind of in an on-demand basis. And our return to work with the federal government in terms of determining which significant interactions bring people back into the office, this is one of the virtual capabilities that we're looking to fold in as well. Last thing on this slide, you can see the top types of topics. You may have different interest areas than we did, but these are just our kind of big interest areas that we looked at when we were starting the scouting process. Any questions here?
Yes, we've got another one. Are you looking at exoskeletons more as a control for telerobotics or more as an assist to human bodies?
Both. There's a couple out of Japan that are doing teleoperation capabilities with exoskeletons for robotic equipment. So there's been projects we've done in that area. But of the other 9 proof of concepts we've done in exoskeletons over the last 3 years, they've been really on joint assistance or lift assistance technologies to reduce kind of the workplace injuries and or drive greater efficiency in field operations for maintenance, repair, installation of equipment. Most manufacturing sites are pretty well optimized and configured for human factors. So there are some use cases there, but mostly it's field use cases where the exoskeletons have been put in for worker safety and human augmentation, metabolic enhancement.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
Those are all the questions so far. Thank you.
So let's dive into a couple big topics. I picked two just as an example. And just as an aside, if anybody would like to reach out and contact me directly or To The Edge, if you'd like a more specific bespoke presentation on CES technologies, we'll be happy to do that. Again, very high level return. I think we scouted over 400 companies, as well as our portfolio of 15,000 that we currently work with. And so this is just a taste, if you will. So one of the things, again, what I wanted to context here is our activity is in developing testing and integration labs with hospitals and retail organizations to really drive this notion of better access to care. Lots of communities have been disadvantaged with access to care. And so if we can lower the cost of care through intelligent devices, that second bullet there, create trusted and disposable diagnostic sensors for enhanced home health care, this will allow us to really realize this vision on the bottom, which is how do we use all this smart appliance, smart home technology to persistently and continuously monitor the health. One of my favorites that came out, which is also by far the most inappropriate conversation, which is Toto Health. This toilet will track all of the health markers that come out of human waste, and they will give you a health score associated. So you can think of in the future, drains, faucets, your plumbing, which today is already being used in COVID-19. They're using wastewater treatment for population demographics in terms of COVID-19 infection. Started in France, has also been used in the US. And so these are going to become critical components to home health and population health moving forward. And so that's very interesting that we have there. The second is that if you detect some type of anomaly or condition, what could you have ordered that would be delivered to your home, whether that's an Everwell test kit out of Austin that has a full range of testing the home products. You also have a range of sensors, and that's where Healthy You comes into place, which is a very small fob-like device with several leads on it. Those are the gold portions of it there that track 9 different metrics that you would normally get in a hospital. And this is why we say the word trusted. Trusted by whom? Trusted by the medical professionals who are likely to discount this type of data. And so there's been a big push. TytoCare, if you're familiar with TytoCare, has trusted. Healthy You has intelligent stethoscopes. This is their next generation product, so you can look at that. And this gets into employee healthcare, kind of company provided care, if you will, self-insured type of models. As well. And so that is one of the critical components that we would have, that you could imagine that if you detect something from either an in-home device or in-home appliance, you can then order directly a set of disposable or low-cost sensors that can further refine the diagnosis. And then from that, you can have automated order and fulfillment. If you were to look at the data model and data strategy for Amazon, this is Amazon's strategy, a push to buy component for their healthcare activities. And so they can bundle, as they do likely, with would you like to buy, or others like to buy this approach. And so this is clearly something that has got a lot of our clients spooked and is driving a lot of activity in this space. The last, which we did not see at CES, which is the UAS approved shipping containers. This is both FAA and FDA approved for medical samples, labs, and ultimately organ transplants. We are flying a proof of concept here in the next month that will be testing the next generation container, as well as the next generation UAS command and control architecture for the national rollout of UAS corridors across the country. And so with that, like I said, Healthy You and Toto were a couple that we found. I think a couple on here, iMedisync, which is a company out of Asia. This is basically a head helmet. It's a helmet for your head that will be able to detect over time Parkinson's and other types of mental health issues and diseases. You'll be able to track that on a continuous basis. This one's personally, my son has seizures. And so obviously being able to detect these types of patterns on an ongoing basis, or aging parents that may have memory loss or other related mental conditions, this is quite important. Valencell is another one in the top right. This measures your blood pressure in your ear. So it's a sensor package that can be put on your phone. It's a sensor package that can be put into any earpiece and constantly monitor your blood pressure. One that wasn't at CES, but I thought it was appropriate to kind of throw in some other research that we've done, just to give you a perspective here, is Berkeley is doing a printable circuit, and that's very important for scale and cost, of a sweat sensor using microfluids to draw in sweat from the human body, and to use that as a proxy for many of the labs that we go into the hospital for. And so these are all examples of saying some emerging technologies. And again, there's probably about 50 others that we looked at. This is just a snapshot of health and wellness types of solutions that can be used to drive greater degrees of healthcare access and availability, much lower cost for many of these things. But it also raises great, interesting opportunities and challenges for others, meaning, if you look at some of the strategies, 80% of healthcare will be executed outside of a hospital in the future. That's a pretty powerful statement and a vision statement many of our clients have. The second piece of it is that, what do you do with all this data? What's the so what? If we're having a full physical every day of our life that's more detailed and available than any other physical we have on an annual basis, how does that help with population health? How does that help with other types of big systemic issues in the healthcare system to be able to move forward? So many questions are coming out of this research as others, but here are some of the suppliers that I think are very interesting and innovative when it comes to health and wellness. Beth, let's pause there and see if there's any questions.
I don't have a question, just a statement. This is Monica from AT&T. Just very interesting data. Would not have hadn't heard most of these tech trends. Very interesting.
Great, thank you. Okay.
Sorry, Ty, I was having bandwidth issues. No questions in the comments.
You looked frozen for a second there, Beth, so I was concerned. The second is around autonomous platforms. I selected a couple here that would be interesting. So again, I mentioned we're on the hunt for any types of solutions that would help us with our efforts in designing this national corridor for UAS operations across North America. So it's a very exciting proof of concept that we're constantly evaluating both UAS platforms, their lift capacities, their on board collision detection and avoidance capabilities, as well as ground control capabilities. Not as many at CES that we had liked. Automated intermodal and supply chain operations, as well as warehouse and material handling equipment, that's MHE. And then this concept, which has really been articulated, which is 15-minute omni-channel fulfillment and delivery services. Reef distribution centers, this is who came up with this concept here on the bottom. They have a trademarked phrase, which is the power of proximity. And they went and bought parking garages that represented access to something like 70% of the US population within a 15-minute in an urban environment. And so their operation is these ghost kitchens, these ghost structures that can be used as distribution nodes, delivery systems, kitchens today that are being used to be able to do this 15 minutes. And so this gets into not only about how the supporting infrastructure of the supply chain has to be very dynamic, has to be extremely automated so that you can provide this type of service in 15 minutes. It's not all services. I don't want to say that all SKUs are going to fall into this category, but there are going to be more and more kind of on-demand capabilities that are here. And let's just think, we used to think, hey, I'd go to the store and get something or order it. Even today, if you've ordered a Peloton, good luck getting that in the next 6 months, or even a Lazy Boy chair in 6 months. But we also have gone from, I have a 2-week delivery to a 2-day delivery to a same-day delivery to a 1-hour delivery. So obviously the path is moving towards there. 2 companies that I really wanted to highlight, which is a little bit out of the norm, and that's why I highlighted these 2 companies on top. One is DriveU, and the other is Lextan. What's interesting about these 2 companies is that there is a definite push that is looking to use teleoperation capabilities as a bridge to level 5 automation for autonomous vehicles. It does not discount the fact that these teleoperated vehicles would not be configured with a wide variety of sensing technologies, whether that be LiDAR, radar, some of the other advanced computer vision capabilities that are out there as well. And so all of those incorporated with a remote operator that gives not only the presence of an operator in the Lextran model, that's a mid-mile, last mile delivery solution, as well as DriveU is a capability that you could integrate into your fleet of vehicles today, which would allow you to do teleoperation. 5G will continue to be critical to that. There will be a mix of both onboard capabilities to do sense and collision avoidance, et cetera, as well as, just as a frame of reference, a car has to operate under 4.3 milliseconds to be able to detect and respond to a potential risk within the driving path and roadway. And so there's some challenges there. So teleoperations, this is what Rio Tinto is doing. If you've been following their mining efforts here, there's also pretty tremendous number, some recent announcements of what Phantom Auto is doing and some others that are in that area. And so in this area, we see both, industrial parks, mining communities, closed kind of networks, if you will, pushing the envelope of autonomous vehicles, as well as looking at the mid-mile solution. But we do think that telepresence will be a bridging function until we get not necessarily technically to level 5 of autonomy, but more importantly, be able to get to acceptance of level 5 technology as well. The last one is from TDK. This is an IoT road tire sensor. Both Goodyear, Michelin, and others are embedding these types of sensing capabilities directly into tires. But if you wanted to, separate, the tire, if you will, from the wheel itself, and you may have other solutions that have wheels and different tires or different types of wheels that you want to be able to monitor. What's very interesting in that, and there are many out there that have this sensing capability that detect vibration, heat, and obviously track rotation, help with distance calculations, and precision navigation timing capabilities as well. But the reason I highlighted this is because this is also an IoT sensor that does energy harvesting. And so this gets back to the point about us being able to work with our clients to identify low-cost sensor frameworks that have the ability to generate, store, and manage power locally so that they can be able to operate in a disconnected type of environment or disadvantaged type of environment. And that's not just in out in the boonies type of place. Think about a retail store. You may have computer vision systems, you may have RFID tracking systems, but do you have power to that display where you want to be able to have some sort of interactive customer experience as well? And so those are tremendous challenges that organizations continue to face. And that's one of the things that we're going to continue to be focused on and looking for moving forward. And so if you're interested in the wide range of sensing technologies that are very critical to autonomous platforms, we have that data. But I thought it was interesting to call out a couple of unique things here in the autonomous vehicle that came from our CES kind of look. Let's pause there again, Beth, and see if there's any questions.
I don't have any.
It's also code for me getting a drink of water.
Oh, okay. Got it. Again, please, if you do have a question, type it in the chat, or we'll probably have time at the end to do a Q&A as well.
Okay. So the other part of CES that we all go to is for the really cool stuff, right? This is why we always go, and I always make a trip to see the TVs. Many of you may have been with me last year when the power went out in the TV pavilion. That was a lot of fun because it's dark if that happens. But curved TVs, giant TVs, 8K TVs, there's certain things you go check out. You go out what's going on in this year was the yogurt capsule kind of service, kind of like your Keurig. You put a yogurt capsule in and it spits out ice cream for you. But I wanted to highlight just a couple. Some of these, again, came out of conversations that we had. Some of these were part of sessions that we detected. But Mudra is a very interesting accessory to an Apple Watch. And this is actually these silver tabs here in this are actually detecting your muscle movements in your wrist, in your hand, that allow you to control various different objects in his way to do user interface. There's other companies that are doing this as well as really an input mechanism or a user interface mechanism for various different things. And so this is also very interesting. The other thing I'd like to just call out here when we talk about Apple, let's remember that in the iPhone today, an iPhone 12, what was normally a $40,000 LiDAR sensor is now inside of a device. So Apple is really good at manufacturing hardware and software to lower the cost of sensors. So all the sensors that we have seen that do blood pressure monitoring or other types of health and wellness components, continue to keep an eye on Apple as a potential disruptor in the healthcare space, not necessarily because they're have relationships with Cerner or other type of EHRs, or they've acquired companies like Apple and Google have, Amazon or Google have, but Apple as a really good manufacturer of hardware that has home health kit that is looking to federate and really betting on the consumer being the owner of their healthcare data. That's what Tim Cook has stated publicly as part of the goal of Apple's strategy. So things like this, just be mindful of Apple, integrating those into there as well. I don't know if anybody has $16,000 to spend on a very cool bathtub, but this is Kohler's experiential bathtub here. Get a little aromatherapy. You get constant hot water, which is my biggest issue with the bath. And then it has all these other features and function. And so the tech-enabled devices are super critical here. The other one that I just want to call out, which is on the surface, people understand, but the voice integration into your refrigerator, your sink, your mirror, in this case, your Moen faucet at this point, is a highly disruptive capability. Number one, we don't think about this, is that there is a microphone in everybody's house that may or may not be listening at any point in time. So there's, that creepy consideration. The second is that think of the richness of data that is coming from having access and the ease of use to facilitate the ordering of anything from your home. Think about this in your kitchen. Not only can you turn on the faucet and set it for a particular temperature and have that variable control, but if you ask to order something, then whoever owns that voice service or integrates that voice service can simply say, order that from X store. And now you have a captured market that understands not only what you're doing, but where you're at. The refrigerators are just as disruptive because most retailers want to see inside what they want to know what's in your pantry, what's in your refrigerator, and it's a way to orchestrate or to auto-fulfill things that you may want in there as well. And face it, we like ease, we like comfort, we don't like transaction complexity. And so I put that on there just as an exemplar of how voice is going to be integrated moving forward. This famous group here, which is the lower left, not at CES, but talked about at CES, specifically in the sports and entertainment session. This is super interesting because they created all those environments that we've seen on TV, whether it's at the NBA, the NFL, this is WWE, World Wrestling Federation, or entertainment. And what this is those mixed reality experiences where you have either sports that are going on and you have this digital personas brought in from various different people. And again, as we think about hybrid environments and, in the workplace, that's what's critical. We've talked about this kind of shared experience that we have. The other kind of concept, which is a variation of this, or you've seen the Mandalorian set as well. If you look up Mandalorian filming, you'll find fascinating conversations about projecting in high definition screens. That's just a round stage that has screens around it, as well as on the ceiling, and they filmed almost all the scenes on this little bitty stage. They didn't go to the deserts in Africa or into the American West. They filmed everything there locally. So watch that. It's really interesting. And so what it really brings to the art of the possible is, can we have conference rooms with physical participants that have more realistic and high fidelity involvement of virtual people that are being have presence in those meetings. And this is an example of what they're doing in sports. So like many things, as we said, the future is already here at the beginning. A lot of what we can look to is exemplars that happen in other industries, and then consider what would be the drivers and cost considerations that would allow us to achieve something similar within our own collaboration environments. This last one is a pair of glasses that are tunable. So those of us that are getting a little bit older and may have different bifocals or trifocals, this allows you to tune your glasses to see close or to have far. So more of an intelligent, if you will, kind of glassware, that these are tunable itself, but you can imagine as we continue to move forward, that these would automatically detect and be able to adjust things accordingly using eye gazing and tracking technology as well, to be able to do something like this is also. So there's many other cool things. You may have seen IBM's Mayflower ship. You may have seen GM's kind of autonomous vehicles. There's a lot of research that's out there in publications already about foldable phones, smart devices, rollable phones, flexible displays, computer platforms, etc. We didn't want to recreate that wheel today. Those are very easily accessible to everybody. And so we wanted to focus on some of the cool tech that may not have been seen during the CES over the last couple of weeks.
Hey, Ty, we do have a good question that I think everyone would like to have the answer to. Good point on the in-home devices listening. Are these companies really working on security and privacy issues, or is that just lip service?
There's a couple of answers there. I think number one, if you look at Alexa's terms and conditions, it's a little squishy. The other thing that you need to know as an enterprise, if you're building a service on Alexa, they ask you to develop the entire NLP model and the taxonomy for what you want Alexa to listen for your service. And you really got to look at the T's and C's for who owns that derivative work as you train that model. So for our Enterprise Tech Titans members, that's a consideration. In terms of the security, one of the key lines of research that we have continued to do to include remotely setting a dishwasher on fire to prove that digital arson was real, is that security is, again, you've got multiple manufacturers that are all following similar types of approaches. Some of them have very basic defaults, passwords, and you are relying on the user to manufacture or to manage and configure these devices to make them secure on networks that are easily threat vectors into their home. And the last piece of it is that we continually push forward on connecting not just simple things like our electronic devices, but things that have heating elements, our MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing infrastructure that's here. And so the potential for a digital event causing a physical loss is extremely high. And that's probably one of the largest concerns that we have within this marketplace is that the threat surface area continues to expand. There's not really a great model at this point to help manage all these devices that are going into homes and frankly into businesses. And if SolarWinds taught us just because somebody is in that space doesn't mean that they're watching their back door as well.
Right.
And so that's a tremendous concern that one of the things we recommend to our clients that our OEMs develop in these spaces is that the trust factor has to be built into the architecture from the beginning. That means endpoint detection, anomaly detection, and having the internal capability to detect, isolate, and ultimately respond to this, like Microsoft's approach to the SolarWinds breach. That's a great example. Many others here happened. That was just one in the news. They just didn't do that magically over 3 days. They had built up the muscle to do that as well. So the short answer is it's sketchy at best. Buyer beware if you're purchasing these things. Make sure you're configuring and managing. And for the enterprise, have a very wary eye, because most of the breaches that have happened, many of the breaches that have happened at the enterprise level have not necessarily come from the company. It's come from a support contractor, a device manufacturer, somebody who was exposed and was used as a vulnerability to get into the enterprise. It's a very high level statement, but generally.
Thank you.
Anything else on that or other questions?
We do have another question if you have the time.
We're on to questions, so let's go.
Going back to the previous slide with the autonomous vehicles, what new remote operated vehicles, machines have you seen in the defense space? Level 5 remote operated vehicles for combat areas.
Wow. There's probably a very long conversation, and I'd probably want to handle that a little bit differently depending on who it is and where it comes from. Because I just need to make sure that I's are dotted and T's are crossed. But in general, you have several different developments within the military community, both in the United States and others, that are looking at the blending of autonomous, semi-autonomous, and manned operations, human operations, to support the warfighting activity. And those lines are being pushed, those boundaries are being defined today to what they can respond from a human perspective, from a soldier perspective, as well as that. So it's a very fast moving space that there's a lot of development in. And, you know, if that's a question offline, I think that'd probably be best handled in that way.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? We have about 5 minutes left. I just want to be respectful of everyone's time, but happy to answer as best I can any questions that you may have.
No questions in the chat at this moment.
Okay. So our kind of
I don't know why. Oh, I was going to say, I don't know why you're not seeing my questions or Andy's.
Yeah, I threw one out there.
I asked if there was any developments in sleep detecting and treating sleep apnea, and Andy's got one about Amazon Sidewalk.
Okay, I apologize. They are just now popping up. I'm sorry.
No worries.
The short answer is on the sleep, yes. There are several. Thatch is one of them specifically that we looked at. There are sleeping conditions as well as monitoring devices that are being used for a variety of sleep conditions to be able to have there as well. So that is something that continues to be a focus of the kind of health and wellness community is around that sleep apnea, as well as be able to monitor some of those different metabolic states within the home environment or working out, you know, basically wearable types of technology. So Thatch is one that popped out in that sleep monitoring and disorder as well.
And then did you see anything about Amazon Sidewalk? And do you have any opinion about this platform?
Not yet at this point. It's for us, we haven't dug that deeply into Sidewalk yet. So I probably have to go to the person who's doing that research for me specifically. And if that's Andy, I can connect with you separately once I touch base with some of my folks that are focused on that.
Yeah, that's okay. I was just curious about it. It certainly is you start thinking about it because of the consumer concerns about privacy and security and their dependence on basically what it is for folks who haven't seen it. New Echo devices would be shipped with a low power WAN capability. And of course that LP WAN is going to make for connectivity that extends over a fairly large area and is pretty effective at penetrating objects. So if a bunch of people buy Echoes with this capability in it, it sets up a bit of a network in the area where those devices are located. And they're going to use a sliver of your bandwidth to communicate with devices around your neighborhood. So your dog could have a tracker on it, and you know it wouldn't take a Echo with Sidewalk in every house even, and your whole neighborhood could essentially track your dog's movement if he got out by you know, consumer devices, and consumers wouldn't even really be there. You know, you're not even really aware of it. That traffic just goes through your device, and you know, you're none the wiser for the most part.
Yeah. Sounds like the Ring neighborhood model that got them in trouble as well. So it'll be interesting, the privacy, as well as it's always amazing to me that Google in the healthcare space and in the home automation space and Amazon have comparable strategies, obviously different from different points of view, but the way that the market and the regulators look at them are totally different. I don't understand, obviously there's probably reasons behind that, but in terms of how regulators have looked at Google in this space versus how they're looking at Amazon at this point, there's a very substantial difference.
Any other questions? If not, I just want to thank all of you for taking the time from your busy day to attend. And I want to again thank Ty. I just think he does a great job of capturing some of the highlights and most important things about CES, and saves all of us a lot of time, and in past years, a lot of footwork. So thanks again, Ty, and everyone has my contact information. I put it in chat. If you have any questions that you'd like me to address to Ty, happy to do it. You've also got Ty's email contact information in one of his early slides.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Have a great day.